Hey, friendos, and Larson.
Also Cal.
And welcome to Going in Raw Countout, the only pro wrestling top 10 countdown list right here on youtube.com/Steven Larson. I'm sure there's plenty of other wrestling countdowns. I can think of several off the top of my head. However,
yeah, I can think of a few that I actually follow and watch as well.
It's the only one right here.
But this is the one that matters. To me, it does. I don't know. It matters to me, damn it.
I appreciate that, Cal. I really do.
Oh, no. Thank you.
Anyways, you can be found right here. youtube.com/Steven Larson. Anywhere fine podcasts are available. We're on the Patreon, patreon.com/Steven Larson. Yeah, I think that's it. Pro Wrestling Tees. We got our own merch store, friendomarket.com. So last weekend, week from today, in fact, we witnessed the latest chapter, one of the great rivalries in pro wrestling history between Kazuchika Okada and Hiroshi Tanahashi. The first time a match between the two of those excellent wrestlers has taken place right here
in the States, baby.
On American soil.
In Texas.
Yeah. And it was quite the event. The crowd was super into it. But, of course, that got my brain to thinking other rivalries.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to talk about today, the top 10 pro wrestling rivalries. I mean, I guess the criteria is that it's got to be good, and important, and that's pretty much. Let's get started here.
I mean, let's these rivalries they're all great. I mean, but we can't forget the soon-to-be rivalry between Adam Mayhem versus Grizzly Cowjack.
Yeah,
the feud over the.
I'll be honest at this point. I'm hoping that's a pretty one-sided rivalry and fight in favor of one Cowjack.
But it's not on the list, unfortunately. Not yet.
You know, we'll do a top 10 like we did in the old 10 for the win days. We'd do a list, maybe 4 or 5 years down the line, we'd revisit it.
Yeah.
So maybe in 4 or 5 years, if Steve and I are still chugging away here and going in Raw,
who knows?
We can revisit this list.
Yeah.
And number 1 would be Cowjack pummeling, destroying Adam Mayhem.
Poor Adam Mayhem.
Year after year. Because at this point, he owes me a lot of money.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's kick things off with number 10. Vader versus Cactus Jack. Now, this feud, this rivalry didn't last as long as some others on this list. However, as short as it was, it left a serious impact. It started all the way back, 1993, where Cactus, towards the end of 92, 93, he was feuding with Paul Orndorff, Vader, and that transitioned to a one-on-one program between himself and Vader. They only had a handful of matches, but really pushed this feud, this rivalry, onto this list of mine, my estimation, is the level of pure violence it brought to WCW, which far too often was cartoony.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, like, watching back some of their matches, like, I mean, they had Harley Race involved when he came out with Van Vader, and he was taking crazy bumps.
Yeah,
but yeah, dude, man, this is Cactus Jack pre-Mankind doing all the crazy spots, and he was doing this with Van Vader.
Yeah, this is actually pre-Deathmatch Cactus Jack too. This is before he went to Japan and feuded with Terry Funk. I could think of countless Mick Foley feuds. He had a great feud, a great rivalry with The Undertaker that lasted a bunch of years. Terry Funk, of course, you can just do a whole retrospective on all their deathmatch days in Japan. Go on and on. Even Foley had a really good feud with Edge when he was doing the Radar Superstar stuff. But for me, when you take into account the period of time, the context, WCW around this time was doing really over-the-top cartoonist stuff. I think it was in this same period where they had the not the Doomsday cage, the House of Horrors cage match with the electric chair in it.
Yeah.
And it was so ridiculously over the top. And you have Vader fresh off his most recent stint in Japan, where he was known to laying the lumber to people, working really stiff. And he was beating the hell out of Foley. Foley was dishing it back. There was this one bit where Vader, on April 24th, Harley Race peeled back the mats ringside, and Vader
powerbomb. Cactus Jack took that powerbomb
on concrete.
God, and it's just like that. I'm sure Catch is thinking, this will probably be the worst bump I'll take. No, he took many worse bumps. But that's the first time you ever see something like that. I mean, at least that's the first time I've ever seen.
Or at least on cable television.
On cable television.
I mean, the level of violence just there. I guess in another instance, they had a match that was so brutal that Cactus Jack needed like 20-something stitches to close up his face because he was bleeding everywhere. But because of that powerbomb spot, he apparently lost sensation in his left foot fully did and suffered some memory loss.
That's crazy.
So they had a Texas death match at Halloween Havoc 93, a match so violent, so brutal that WCW said to them, "You're not welcome to wrestle on pay-per-view anymore. We're banning this feud from taking place on pay-per-view," because you got the Halloween Havoc set, which was more or less the same from 93 till like when WCW closed.
Yeah.
You know, and it's got the fake little wooden cutout tombstones, and it's all very quaint neighborhood Halloween. It's not the least bit scary. And you got these guys beating the hell out of each other.
They're putting on a horror show out there.
Yeah, totally. It's a horror movie taking place
Yeah.
on like what should be an amusement park ride.
Yeah.
And it's brutal, it's violent, and it's something that you never saw in WCW at the time.
No.
Also because of this feud, Mick Foley's missing an ear.
Yeah, he got his ear
ripped off.
Part of his ear ripped off.
So that took place the following year in Germany. They were having a match. Foley did the thing where he got his head caught in the ropes, and I guess the ropes were
they rubber, not rope?
Yeah, I think so. They were. I think he said
WCW used rubber ropes.
I think these were like he said elevator cables.
Yeah.
In Germany, and so he pulled his head out, and then I guess he split the back of his ears, and then Vader punched him and accidentally ripped one of his ears off.
Yeah, and this feud was known for just being brutal and
violent.
Just two big bastards just kicking the crap out of each other.
Totally.
And that's something that hasn't been seen, on cable TV ever.
Not to this degree, no.
Yeah.
And not much sense. Kind of a disappointing thing that this feud didn't carry over at all when both were in WWF.
Yeah.
Vader was wildly underutilized while under Vince McMahon's employ. We saw all the damage he wrought in All Japan, what a dominant force he was in WCW, and he goes to WWF, and they don't do anything with him.
No, they barely even used him as much as they really could have. I think a lot of it was like his weight and his size, and Vince wasn't really into how Van Vader looked.
No, he wanted guys that were like pure muscle.
Yeah, but then it's like you see Mankind, who's like the complete opposite of that, and they were able to write and utilize him to the best that he could, best you can go.
I know it's odd. One of the great Haas wrestlers of all time, Vader.
Yeah,
widely underutilized in WWF, and it's a bummer because apparently he was going to have the program that Shawn Michaels and Sid had in late 97, early 98.
Yeah, I heard about that.
That was supposed to be Vader's spot.
Yep.
But Vince apparently soured on Vader so much that he thought, I have a better option.
I'm going to use Sid Justice. Or was he Sid Vicious?
Psycho Sid at that
Psycho
time.
Sid. He's so vascular.
Oh, my gosh. It's not summer. He's not going to leave us to play softball. We can count on him this time of year.
But like those early matches with Van Vader and just Cactus Jack,
man, brutal,
dude. They were brutal. And like I was watching one of the matches before we even came on here, and I'm just like strike, stiff, just hard hitting.
Not a whole lot of wrestling.
Ow.
A whole lot of just beating each other up.
Just a lot of punches.
Yeah, a lot of punches.
Stiff.
That's the way to put it. Stiff. Number 9. Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan, brother. So if we go way back to 1985, kind of the dawn of Hulkamania, you have Macho Man in WWF. He's a heel. You have Hogan, top guy, babyface. Their paths crossed a little bit here and there for that WWE title. But I don't remember a real long, protracted feud by a stretch of the imagination. But I think during Macho Man's Intercontinental title reign, this happened October 3rd, 1987, Saturday Night Main Event. Savage turned face. Elizabeth went to get Hogan after Honky Tonk Man tried to break guitar over Savage's head. She goes backstage. She brings out the Hulkster, brother.
Brother.
What are you going to do?
Dude, brother. Maybe that's why I'm the man. Yep.
Brings him out to make the save. And from that moment on, they were on the path to not rivals, but friends.
They formed the Mega Powers.
Mega Powers, yes. During their friendship, Hogan helped Savage win the WWF title at WrestleMania 4 when they had that tournament.
Yep.
While Hogan was off about to go film No Holds Barred, I think.
Yeah.
And then they were in the main event of SummerSlam as a tag team in matching gear, red and yellow, Mega Powers in full effect, brother.
Yep.
Defeating Ted DiBiase and Andre the Giant in the main event. And it was about 6 months later when it all came crashing down. Hard.
Yeah.
Hard. February 3rd, 1989 to be exact, on the show, NBC primetime special here, the main event. They were in a match against the Twin Towers. My memory is correct. Elizabeth took a bump. Macho Man was tossed into her.
Yeah.
She took a bump. Hogan, so distraught, picks her up.
Takes her to the back.
Yeah.
To get checked out.
Yeah. Leaving Savage to get destroyed by the Twin Towers.
Yep.
Eventually, Elizabeth says, no, you have to go back out there and help my husband, the Macho Man, your friend. And by the time Hogan got back out there, Macho Man was so upset, slapped him in the face. Yep. He walked out on Hogan.
Yep.
And then you have that famous bit backstage.
Hey, brother, I can tell by your lustful eyes.
Oh, I didn't do anything, brother.
Eyes. No, you lustful eyes. Don't you touch me.
Don't you touch me. Don't you touch me.
Don't you touch me.
I didn't do anything, brother.
You lustful eyes.
I didn't do anything, brother.
You know what's funny about this feud is that some of the coaches would assign certain guys to study feuds for booking purposes, just in the future someone want to take the role of a producer or part, be on the creative staff. So I think I wasn't assigned this, but I definitely know, I think one of the guys was assigned this whole feud, and then they had to write about it and come back and give like
a book report.
A book report in front of everybody in the ring.
That's pretty cool.
I know, a little fun fact about the Performance Center, because a lot of times not everybody knows their stuff, and this is one of the feuds that one of the guys had to do a little report on.
Yeah, this is one of the few times in, like this particular the Hogan era, the golden era of WWF, where they actually execute a really interesting, well-developed, long-term story. Is almost 2 years.
Yeah, this was like a 2-year build.
Yeah, and that generally didn't happen, especially for Hogan around that time. They'd cycle heels through for him in a fairly regular clip.
Yep.
Because it was, WrestleMania 1, of course, around the time he was feuding with Piper. And then after that, he had a feud with Orndorff, King Kong Bundy, of course, Andre the Giant. And it wasn't really till this Hogan's Macho Man storyline, the Mega Power storyline, where they said, okay, here's an opportunity to take our two top guys, put them in a program together, first as partners, later as foes, and maybe make some money out of it.
Yeah.
And Savage got one of Hogan's better matches. Well, it was like 75% a pretty good match.
Yeah.
At WrestleMania 5, where the first 2/3 or 3/4 of it was a good Macho Man match, and then the last quarter, guess what? Yeah. What you gonna do, brother?
Yep.
Hulk out.
Hulk out.
Finger point. You punches, boot, leg drop. Hogan wins.
Yep.
Reclaiming the WWF title. I guess kind of parallel to a lot of this stuff happening. Hogan and Savage were friends behind the scenes until 1992. When Macho Man and Elizabeth
were getting divorced,
marriage
and then
was falling apart.
Elizabeth was hanging over at a Hulkster's house with his wife, and Hulk would lie about her chilling over there, kind of airing out dirty laundry about Macho Man and Macho Man's personality. From what I've heard from one of the coaches, Steve Kern, who was Skinner, who was very good friends with Macho Man, said that he would obsess over a lot of these type of things. So from what he told me, that Macho Man had a hard time getting over Elizabeth because she, was airing out dirty laundry about him to the Hulkster, and he was lying that he had nothing to do with it. So therefore, they had real heat between themselves.
But apparently, I guess they managed to patch that all up after Hogan went to WCW.
Yep.
He brought Macho Man in as well. At first, they were friends, partners on screen until Hogan swerved the world, brother, and joined the NWO. That didn't last very long. I mean, they had a brief feud, but then, of course, Macho Man, for some inexplicable reason, joined the NWO too.
Hey, I might as well, join this team.
Going where the going's good, brother.
Oh yeah.
So, but even till the day, I guess briefly before Macho Man, of course, this is according to Hogan, they had some sort of falling out. But then Hogan tells a story of how he was getting some sort of physical for the doctor for something, maybe a movie he was doing. I don't know what the hell it was. Again, it's Hogan. Take with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
And
he's a fairy tale teller.
He's been known to spin some yarns.
Yeah.
So he's sitting there in the doctor's office, if I remember correctly. He says Macho Man comes in because he's getting a physical done for something. They have a conversation. They patch things up. Just, like a matter of a few months or so, seemingly before Macho Man unfortunately passed away
in the Jeep car accident.
Yeah.
Dude, it's crazy. It's funny. Like, that whole feud and stuff, that's something that at least I'll take from the Performance Center that, like, I really appreciate was, I don't know if they do this now, but Bill DeMott would have us do reports and study guys and feuds just so that we have an idea on, like, how creative works, so that how they do long-term booking. And the next number that we have, they definitely did a lot of long-term booking. And you could see where, like, these two guys are just students of the game. So
totally.
But yeah, long-term booking. We had to study this stuff at Performance Center, not just learning moves or character. You got to know a little history.
That's cool. That's cool. Let's move on to number 8 then.
Yep.
Number 8, Johnny Gargano versus Tommaso Ciampa. This all started back at NXT Chicago, the very first one back in May of 2017. After a defeat at the hands of Authors of Pain, the two members of DIY, Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa, were up on the top of the stage, and Ciampa goes over to Johnny and says something like, we've had our time, but now this is my moment. He takes Johnny, he tosses him to the LED board. He does like an air raid crash through the announce table. Shocking heel turn, considering what had happened before that.
Yeah.
The two of them being brought into NXT essentially on day contracts.
Yeah.
Being kind of put together as a tag team for the first Dusty Classic. It seemingly not a lot was expected of them when they were brought in, except to be extra hands. And due to their immense talent, their fabulous chemistry, and their charisma, got over huge with the NXT crowd.
And talk about two guys that aren't exactly like mega indie darlings, and especially how they had to follow up with the fallout of seeing Shinsuke Nakamura leave. You see Finn Balor leave, Kevin Owens leave, Sami Zayn leave, these like NXT pioneers. And it's like, okay, well, how is NXT going to fall with those guys leaving? You have Gargano Ciampa that came in. They had him in as a tag first. And then, unfortunately, Authors of Pain aren't anything special now like they were back then with Paul Ellering. But they were able to create something and make it huge. And to me, it's like this is the first real feud that NXT had ever created that hadn't do anything outside of NXT. With Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn had they had some history. I don't know how much Samoa Joe and Finn Balor had,
I don't know either.
But I do know this was organically made in NXT, and this carried NXT for a long time. Like, these two were NXT
for pretty much all 2018.
All of 2018, exactly. So this feud to me isn't exactly like, you could argue and say, yes, Macho Man and Savage might be bigger, and there's more longevity at the moment with Mankind or Cactus Jack and Vader, but these are the guys that help make NXT its legit own kind of brand.
Yeah. And I think what really takes this up a notch, and maybe, in 10, 15 years, through the prism of history, this would be much higher. Because I know the feud probably didn't exactly end, or the rivalry didn't exactly end, at least this phase of it, how they really planned to because of Ciampa's injury.
Yeah.
But I've talked about this with Steve a lot. It's like, this was like a Shakespearean wrestling story, something we don't see very often, a wrestling story with depth where a crutch isn't just a crutch.
Yeah, it's a weapon.
It means something. Like the knee brace isn't just a knee brace. There's meaning
there's symbolism behind each
Exactly. And that's not something you get in wrestling storylines very often, at least not to this degree.
Yeah.
And the twists and turns, and you had Ciampa, who after the match at TakeOver Chicago in 2017, he had to go get knee surgery because he blew out his knee like 2 days prior to the match, suffered another injury during the match, and so he was gone for like 8 months.
Yeah.
And so all while Ciampa was gone, Gargano was dealing with the ghost of DIY and Ciampa and losing matches when Zelina Vega would throw the shirt.
And that's the
ring.
thing; they were able to keep storylines interesting because Johnny was going through such turmoil with the DIY. So they were able to create angles for other wrestlers because of that. So like seeing Zelina, being so calculated, throwing that DIY shirt, and that distracts Johnny just enough for Andrade to go out there and pick up the W or whatever. That's huge.
Yeah.
And then what's awesome is Ciampa comes back.
Yeah.
Didn't skip a beat. They're back right in, and especially in an era where our our memories, and we get distracted easily, and we forget something within a few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that they always preach is like, oh, don't worry about it. No one's ever going to remember it. They would say that sometimes. This time, you can't forget it because this feud is so good.
No.
And I think it's my favorite feud of this modern era.
Oh, totally. It's got to be up there.
Yeah.
NXT TakeOver Philadelphia, beginning of 2018, following a loss to Almas for the NXT title. Gargano's up the top of the ramp with Candice LeRae, who comes out and attacks him. The returning Tommaso Ciampa, jacked,
leaned.
Oh man, vascular,
So vascular.
jacked. Attacks him. Shortly thereafter, Gargano wants another shot on NXT TV for the NXT title. He is convinced to put up his NXT career to get the title shot. Of course, Ciampa screws him out of the victory. Cost Johnny's NXT career, which sets an unsanctioned match at TakeOver New Orleans. Johnny goes over, gets his job back, but then Ciampa starts to beat the hell out of Gargano, wins 2 more matches after that.
Yeah.
They have this kind of weird, somewhat alliance after Gargano attacks Aleister Black, seemingly turning to the dark side.
Trying to get Gargano to join, like you said, the dark side, become a Blackheart.
Yeah.
Because that's, Ciampa is the Blackheart.
Yeah. In the whole midst of that, Ciampa wins the NXT title. And
becoming the greatest sports entertainer.
I love that. That was so good. And at the turn of the year, going to 2019, you have Ciampa and Gargano seemingly on the path to some sort of reconciliation, or at least understanding now that Gargano is kind of somewhat of a heel. DIY gets back together for the Dusty Classic. Of course, it seems like Gargano was doing that to infiltrate, get close to Ciampa so he could strike. Unfortunately, however, Ciampa had to have neck surgery, had to vacate the title, so we never got that final blow-off match that would have happened at TakeOver New York this year, because apparently Ciampa was going to have to leave after that match anyways to deal with a neck injury, which is a bummer.
Yeah.
And I hope the final image of this rivalry isn't what we saw at TakeOver New York, with Ciampa coming to the top of the ramp after Gargano winning the title, and seemingly everybody's buddy and happy.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's a lot more that can be done with this.
I agree. And even when they were on Raw that briefly and they were tagging, something in the back of my head was like, I don't want to see them do this, because they did all this work just for them to like hit each other's guts. And they're like, when you take some stuff that happens in reality and you try to write it in, they actually did a good job of trying to write in stuff on their friendship.
Yeah.
Because they even said, like, Johnny Gargano, his wedding, had Ciampa as one of his best men.
Yeah.
He was involved in everything he did.
They used to be roommates, all that kind of stuff.
Roommates and stuff. And so it's like, okay, this is legit. Like, it went from love to hate really quickly.
I love after the Chicago match when the turn happened, like a couple days later, I think it was one of them posted a picture of an empty room that used to be Ciampa's room.
Yeah.
Just kind of like doing little bits of things like that. That's folding over reality with the storyline they're telling. That was really cool.
They did it the right way.
Oh hell yeah. Pretty much across the board, that feud was handled masterfully. Moving on though, NumberSeven, Lita versus Trish Stratus. The first women's match, I believe, to ever main event episode of Monday Night Raw.
Yep.
Trish and Lita, they feuded for the better part of 2 years, off and on. But first, they began as partners. They teamed up first in July 2001. You know, so many of the great rivalries begin as great friendships.
That seems to be a theme.
Yeah.
Where they join up as a tag team of some kind.
Yes.
And then there's some debacle or something messes up, and then there's some finger pointing and some shoving.
There's a turn.
And then next thing you know,
former best friends are now bitter enemies.
Yeah.
So Lita and Trish teamed up as part of the Alliance storyline. Who wants to remember the Alliance storyline? Certainly not me. Eventually, though, I believe in early 2002, maybe it was later than that. Yeah, 2002, I think. Oh, 2003. So Trish had been a champion at that point. She was involved in some weird love triangle thing with Chris Jericho and Christian that I've watched some of the stuff. I listened to the Pritchard talk about it.
Yeah.
I still find it all very confusing. it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
I haven't listened to that yet. I need to check that out.
It's very confusing. I think he talks about it somewhat on the. I know this happens after that. The Judgment Day 2001 podcast. I want to say the show where Jericho won both the titles. Anyways, during the course of all that, Trish turns heel. So she'd been a babyface for a while before that. And then, Lita did that whole storyline with Kane where she was pregnant. After that kind of concluded, her and Trish really started their feud in like November 2004. And it was during that, stretch where they had a title match at Survivor Series, which Lita lost because she was more concerned with beating the hell out of Trish as opposed to winning the title. And on December 6th, the episode of Raw, Lita finally defeated Trish Stratus to win the Women's Championship for the second time. And, they wrestled on and off after that. But just at that point in time, especially the mid-aughts, when it didn't seem like wrestling wasn't really the focus of the women's division at that point, the two of them really held it down.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. So you look at the time frame. You have 2001, 2, all the way 2006, 7.
Yeah.
What group of girls were probably watching pro wrestling a lot at that time? WWE at that time.
We probably had Sasha Banks.
Charlotte, Bayley, Charlotte,
Becky Lynch.
Yep. The Four Horsewomen. With this feud and the way that these women were able to go at each other and really demonstrate how talented women wrestling could be, that influenced and sparked the Four Horsewomen. That helped create more girls that you see now in the indies and all over pro wrestling really want to become legit pro wrestlers on because they never broadcast this kind of stuff ever anywhere.
No.
So now that you can see it on TV and how awesome it was and how two girls that legit want to learn how to become excellent, sports entertainers or pro wrestlers, it helped influence the girls we have now.
Hell yeah.
I mean, we wouldn't have a WrestleMania without these two girls being, headlining that one Raw, their feud. We wouldn't have Becky Lynch, Charlotte, and Ronda Rousey headlining WrestleMania if it wasn't for them, their influence.
The trailblazing they did, yes, totally.
Them being trailblazers.
And not to say in the early aughts, mid-aughts, they weren't great wrestlers. You had Molly Holly. She was awesome.
Yeah.
Jacqueline, amazing.
Yeah.
Victoria, she was really good. But Lita and Trish were the two stars.
They were the two main stars that had more... they had more eyes on them.
Well, they both were. I mean, Trish got so she was pretty good in the ring when she first started. She was not that great.
Yeah,
but she developed into a pretty good wrestler.
Yeah,
Lita was always a pretty good wrestler. Both had immense amount of charisma. Trish was good on the mic. Lita was good too. They were the two crossover stars of that division at the time, and for them to be given a platform to showcase their skills.
Definitely the right time and place with both of them.
Yes, to showcase their skills and show that, hey, the women's division in WWE at this time has some really good wrestling. It's a bummer that the talents in that division at the time didn't have really the showcase, the spotlight they deserved on a regular basis, because far too often they were involved in all sorts of gimmick matches that usually meant they had to demean themselves.
Yeah.
You had Trish barking like a dog to Vince, which is terrible. There's no reason she should have ever done that.
Yeah.
Especially when you see the level of matches that she was putting on. She should have been out there showcasing her abilities as a wrestler, not barking to Vince.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that was just really eye-rolling that these girls had to endure. But in the end, they were still able to do matches and pull a lot of stuff off that influenced a lot of girls to become pro wrestlers, especially when it wasn't exactly something that women would want to be encouraged to do.
And then Trish's final match, at least during her main run, was a victory over Lita in a championship match at Unforgiven 2006. Trish and Lita both showed up periodically. They were in the first Women's Royal Rumble, I believe. Kind of thought that they might have challenged Sasha and Bayley at Mania this year for those women's titles. Tag titles didn't work out. Instead, it was Natalya and Beth Phoenix.
Yeah.
And the Iconics, of course. But it still looks like either of them could still go today.
Yeah, I mean, they both look great,
I know Trish just had a kid, so that probably precluded her from wanting to make a full commitment to get back on the road for that program. Nonetheless, it was great to see them back in action at the Royal Rumble, and I think they were both in action at Evolution. Yeah, they were at Evolution too.
Yeah,
that was cool. Moving on, number 6. Ooh, the Freebirds, doot, versus the Von Erichs. So this all started back, I believe, around 1982, if my memory serves me right. WCCW, World Class Championship Wrestling, had a series of shows called Star Wars. You'd have thought that had been trademarked.
Yeah. Oh, I guess not.
I don't know, or they didn't care. I guess there was 3 of them. And this particular rivalry was birthed on the Christmas Day one of these. It's a cage match between Ric Flair, Kerry Von Erich for the NWA title. You had a ref in there, but also as a special enforcer, you had one Michael P.S. Hayes.
That's awesome.
There's a lot of extra stuff going on. I guess Flair had like a bounty on Kerry. Anyways, so you had Michael P.S. Hayes in the ring, Flair, Kerry Von Erich, ref, and ringside. You got Buddy, and you got Bam Bam.
Bam Bam.
You got
Gordy.
Terry Gordy.
Terry Gordy.
And so I don't know why Michael Hayes. He's in there with no shirt and his jeans on. I don't remember if his jeans are tucked into his boots or if he's got like Reeboks on. I don't remember.
I want to look good.
No, no fanny pack though.
He did not have a fanny pack.
No fanny pack.
I'm sure he had one backstage.
Probably. And so he was getting really hands-on as enforcer, pulling people off pins, pushing people around. End of the match, though, Kerry Von Erich tries to escape the cage, and Bam Bam Gordy slams the door in his head. And that building was mad.
Yeah.
Like the anger inside the venue was so palpable, it felt like the venue itself was angry. It was like a volcano about to explode. That's a really bad analogy I just made.
But no, I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's it's one of those things you watch wrestling videos or from the 70s or 80s and you feel like a riot's about to break out. This was one of those instances.
Yeah.
Von Erichs, this was in Dallas, I think. Home turf, huge baby faces. At the time, the Freebirds, baby faces. Huge heel turn, and it led to a rivalry that apparently spanned about a decade.
Oh, super! And this is why I like Terry Gordy, because with his movements, he's so physical. The way he was able to just slam the thing.
Oh yeah.
People, because he's a big guy, people were able to see it, so that they just went nuts over that. Like what the crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. And so they had several matches. We were watching one from Texas Stadium. 6-man tag match.
Yeah.
A little bit of one from Texas Stadium where the Cowboys played.
Yeah.
And back in the territory days, they weren't in WCCW. They weren't touring the nation. They were touring their territory, probably largely Texas.
Yeah, Texas and Georgia and just those southern states.
And I think predominantly the Dallas area,
yeah.
The Sportatorium. And the Von Erichs and the Freebirds and the various iterations, the permutations of matches that can happen between the 6 of them, just sold out buildings on a regular basis.
Oh, you have Von Erichs are like the first sons of Texas taking on the Freebirds, who they're all these husky bastards going out there just causing all this
from
heat.
Bad Street, USA.
From Bad Street,
USA. Doot. So it was a money-making feud for Fritz Von Erich and WCCW. I kind of lost steam, I'm guessing, once Buddy Roberts and Bam Bam moved on from the Freebirds. I don't really know if Michael P.S. Hayes and Jimmy Garvin really ignited the same level of heat.
I don't think so.
In Dallas,
yeah,
as the fabulous Freebirds. Nonetheless, it is one of the most legendary wrestling feuds in history, and a rivalry which dominated that territory for a better part of a decade. Apparently, they had their last match in April of 1993, so that's 11 years almost after the first encounter.
Wow.
When they
were able
started.
to keep a feud going for 11 years, which is like pretty unheard of. I mean, especially in today's, a lot of things are just have these blow-offs, but back in the territory days, they were able just to keep going. Totally. And like, it's funny, we watched that Texas match. These guys had such big crowds would show up that they didn't have to do a lot just to elicit a reaction. They can just do enough and the people would just freak out or cheer or whatever. That's like, man, that's just taking the night off, is having those kind of matches.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Moving on, number 5, Misawa versus Kawada. I think this rivalry, I didn't know a whole lot about the rivalry. You know about the match from 1994. Like the first 6-star match Meltzer ever had, unless Minami Toyota had his 6-star. Maybe she did. I don't know. She at least had a number of 5-star matches. Anyways, All Japan Pro Wrestling in the early mid '90s is really a promotion and era I need to better educate myself on, because by all accounts, it was some great stuff.
Yep.
It's when you had Stan Hansen towards the tail end of his career there. You had Vader there.
Yeah, Dr. Death.
Yeah,
Steve
Dr.
Williams.
Death. Yes, we'll get to him in a second. And you had Misawa, who was the top guy there during that time after ditching the tiger mask.
Yep.
And then you had Kawada, you had Kobashi, you had several other names. But of course, the match we all hear of is the one that took place in 1994 for Misawa's Triple Crown. But there's a lot more to it. Apparently, both these guys have knew each other going all the way back to high school. They wanted to get the business together. Apparently, Misawa kind of got the early advantage in all Japan in terms of getting a bit of a push, whereas Kawada had to go to like the States and Canada, do excursions and stuff to get some matches under him. He finally came back to Japan. They were putting a tag team together, won the titles. Kawada got his first chance at Misawa's Triple Crown in '92 at All Japan's 20th anniversary show when they were still tag team partners. He took the L, though. About a year later, in 1993, tag partners no more. Things starting to get a bit chippy, from my understanding. Again, a rematch for Misawa's Triple Crown belt. Again, Kawada takes the L. And then about a year later, June '94, we have, again, a Triple Crown rematch. And this the 6-star match.
Yeah.
Meltzer thought it was the best match ever until he saw Kenny and Okada, I believe.
Yep.
Again, Kawada took the L. Finally, though, about a month later, Misawa lost the Triple Crown belt to
Dr. Dusty Williams.
Yep. Who then dropped it to Kawada shortly thereafter. But then Kawada dropped it to Stan Hansen early '95, and then Misawa beat Stan Hansen in May of that year. The only time Kawada ever pinned Misawa, at least during this point of their feud, was in a tag match when Misawa was champ again in June of '95. But only about a month later, Kawada in another 101 rematch lost.
Man, so Misawa was just chasing Kawada, trying to get a W.
Other way around.
Oh yeah, that's what I meant. Kawada was just trying to chase Misawa, getting that W.
And yeah, it seems like Kawada was getting more and more obsessed.
Yeah.
And like every time he'd get closer and closer and closer, but always come up short.
Yeah.
I've seen a good chunk of the '94 match, and it's something else.
Yeah.
They were working stiff back then.
No, I watched a little bit of it before we started, and like they were hitting hard.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when you have two guys that know each other really well, that are friends, they're going to be a little bit harder hitting than, guys that don't really know each other well. Mm-hmm. You can get away with a lot, when you grow up with somebody, you're working with them in the business. Because you can hit them harder, and then eventually, if they don't like it, they'll tell you. So these guys are going to just beat the hell out of each other. Yeah. Because they're friends. They know their limits, and they know how far they can go with each other.
Totally. And if they know that if they go too far, it's communicating. You don't have to worry about necessarily getting a unwanted receipt.
Yep.
So again, that's a period of wrestling that I really need to brush up on. I need to watch a lot more of that because thanks to the outstanding contributions of the Twitter account Larry Otto.
Yeah.
I get a little bit of exposure to it, and what I see is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So it's something I need to watch more of, so I can get more into this feud, because there's apparently a bunch of really good tag matches.
Oh, I'm sure there's tons of stuff.
Misawa, his partner, and Kawada and his, and there's a bunch of awesome, great stuff. So something I need to watch a lot more of. Number 4. Of course, Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels. Why isn't this higher? Why didn't I put this higher? These guys legitimately hate each other for the longest time.
They do not like each other whatsoever.
They might be okay with each other now.
I'm sure they're chill now.
Maybe. I don't know. But Bret seems kind of bitter.
Yeah. Well, I'm not really a big fan of Shawn Michaels. He's just Vince's pretty boy.
Did you ever watch? They did a whole documentary called Rivalries, WWE did, just on these two. And it was after they supposedly made up, when they had the hug in the middle of the ring after Bret came back. Yeah. It was still a little tense at moments between these two.
There was I don't know if it's Rivalries or not, but there's something on the network that we were watching, and you just see both of them sitting next to each other trying to explain their bits. And they're like, it was hard for us because we're around, the dinosaur eras with the big monster men lumbering around. And then you have us two athletic guys trying to put on these great performances. I don't know if Shawn Michaels said that, or I just figured Bret Hart said it.
That sounds like something Bret would say.
I think Bret said something. And then I think Shawn's like, well, these monsters, these dinosaurs. So I think, but you could tell that there was they're still not like
they're cool, but they're not going to be friends.
Yeah, they're not going to be inviting. I'm sure they don't send each other Christmas cards or anything.
Probably not.
No,
probably not. As Brett would tell, they were actually friendly during the early part of their tenure at WWE. I'm not exactly sure when things really turned south. I don't know if Brett was really that upset that Shawn didn't want to drop the belt back to him as was planned for WrestleMania 13. The original plan for WrestleMania 13 is, of course, HBK won the title at WrestleMania 12 in the great Iron Man match. Kind of anointed as the new guy. But the plan was for him to drop the belt back to Brett the following year. Shawn doesn't really like at that period of time, didn't really like dropping belts to anybody.
No, because he was super over at the time. He didn't want to lose momentum.
Well, he didn't like losing.
Yeah, that too.
It wasn't the first time he's decided I'm going to get rid of this belt without losing it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it sprung from that, but that's when things really got testy. The Dark Side of the Ring episode on the Montreal Screwjob does a pretty good job of detailing their actual beef outside of the ring. I mean, the rivalry inside the ring was great. They had a match that was really good at Survivor Series 93, I want to say, when Brett was champ. And, of course, WrestleMania 12. And then, Survivor Series 97, where everything came to a head.
Yep.
That episode of Dark Side of Rings details the fight they had backstage where I guess they were pulling each other's hair out.
Yeah.
Where Shawn went to Vince with the clump of his hair in his own hand, complaining about Brett. And you have the Sunny Days comment that Michaels made in a promo alluding to the fact that alluding that Brett was having an affair with Sunny.
Yeah.
Which Brett said no. And then Brett would go and complain to Vince about that. And then you have Survivor Series 97 where Vince really wanted Brett to drop the belt to Shawn Michaels in Montreal. And now, like the legend always was, well, Brett could have showed up on Nitro the next day with the WWF title. Vince didn't want that. Therefore, Screwjob had to happen.
Yep.
But in Dark Side of the Ring, and Meltzer wrote about it too in the newsletter, Brett had 3 weeks left on his deal. In fact, Bischoff would allow him to stay an extra week so he could drop the belt at the next pay-per-view.
Yeah.
So there really wasn't that danger of, like, contractually, he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I guess maybe there would have been some wiggle room where Bischoff could have said, or WCW could have said the next night on Nitro after Survivor Series 97, oh, by the way, we got the WWF champion coming to WCW here in about a month. And maybe that would have been the source of embarrassment.
Well, yeah, and the thing was, they were so open about Brett leaving, and then Brett, in his mind, with his character, he was like he wanted to keep his character so strong throughout the whole time that he was down to take a pay cut. He didn't care, which meant the boys were all losing money, and he wanted to relinquish the title in his mind, and then move on to go to WCW. Like, man, there's so many theories, stories, speculations.
People still convinced this will work.
Yeah.
I didn't know
Scott
that.
Hall was like, he thinks it's a work.
Oh, still does?
Yeah, still thinks
Earl Hebner still thinks it's a work, and he was in the ring.
Yeah.
Apparently, I can't remember if Meltzer mentioned this or it was in Dark Side of the Ring. Brett had creative control for the last 30, 60 days in the company. So he was well within his right to not drop the belt to Shawn. And whether... I'm sure it was several reasons why he didn't want to do it. We'd always heard that he didn't want to do it in Montreal, in Canada, because he didn't want to.
He didn't want to lose in his home country.
I didn't want to assassinate my character, despite the fact there's all sorts of screwy finishes you could have done.
Yeah.
I don't know. For the longest time, it just seemed like Brett was being really stubborn about just not wanting to drop the belt. But you hear he had time left on his deal. You heard that he was granted creative control his last 60 or 30 days based on his contract. I mean, it's within his rights.
Yeah.
If it's in his deal. I mean, you would hope that you wouldn't want to let personal beef get in the way of business. But if contractually he has that right, he had that right.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's pro wrestling.
And he definitely tried to exercise that right.
He definitely did.
He tried.
He definitely did.
Yeah.
So after the screw job, unsurprisingly, Brett even held a larger grudge against Shawn Michaels. When they brought Brett back in, it seemed like he and Shawn, they had a moment in the ring. That was actually fairly touching when it seemed like they patched things up.
Yeah.
At least, because by that point, Shawn had to retire, came back, found God, seemingly a changed man, not as immature as what he was at the time. when all this stuff happened. So it seems like they kind of, again, patched things up so they could be cordial, but no Christmas cards probably.
Yeah, probably no Christmas
No
cards.
calls on birthdays.
No, I'm sure they don't text each other. How you doing?
Doubtful. Maybe, yeah, no. No, not at all. I'll be surprised. Moving on. Let's go to number 3. Sting versus Ric Flair. This is kind of the feud that carried WCW through the 90s. You had the icon of the old NWA days in Ric Flair versus the franchise in Sting. Feud kicked off in March of '88, the very first Clash of the Champions. March '88. That went against WrestleMania, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Was the main event. Match ended in a 45-minute draw, time limit draw, but it made Sting a massive star in the process. The fact that he was in the ring with the legendary Ric Flair and wrestled to a draw.
For 45 minutes?
Yeah.
Jeez.
It's one of those, like back then, you could wrestle a draw and you'd be like a huge thing.
Yeah, it'd be like this guy couldn't get pinned, couldn't get submitted, didn't get count out. He was able to hold his own against, the champ.
The greatest of all time.
Arguably
at that point. But this is interesting. Apparently, there was ringside judges for this match.
Oh, my God.
They couldn't decide on a finish.
We don't know who won.
Is that what the judges said? We don't know who won.
We don't know.
It was such a good match.
It was so good. It's back and forth.
So Sting went off and did some tag team stuff for a while. Started doing solo stuff again the following year. And then on New Year's Day, I guess 1989, he kicked off his 89 by wrestling Flair to a 1-hour time limit draw on New Year's Day. And then there's in 1989, man, Sting was kind of gullible storyline-wise because he got swerved by Flair a lot. First time in '89, you had Sting. He's getting kind of recruited by the now face Horsemen.
Yep.
He joins them. And then there's a tournament at Starrcade to determine a new number 1 contender to the NWA title. Sting wins that. Flair tries to convince Sting, don't take the title shot. You don't need to do that. Horsemen, all that kind of stuff. Sting's like, no, I'll take the title shot. And then at Clash of Champions 10, the Horsemen, unsurprisingly, turn on Sting. And later in the night, so there's a cage match that has Gary Hart International versus the Horsemen. Sting, I believe, tries to climb up the cage and jacks up his leg. He's out for 5 months. He comes back 1990, and he finally beats Flair for the NWA title July 7th, 1990. I believe it was around this period where RoboCop became involved in the storyline.
Where he broke the cage?
Yeah. Because you know who replaced Sting in the Horsemen? Sid. And so Sting brought RoboCop in because the only man that can match Sid's strength
was a cyborg, a human-genetically cyborg.
Murphy. RoboCop.
But
I had forgotten about this part. So during Sting's run as champ, there was the Black Scorpion.
Yeah.
Going after him, haunting him, messing with him. And like in January of '91, Sting beat Black Scorpion, unmasked him, and it was just Ric Flair.
Yeah.
It was just Ric Flair.
That's awesome.
But that happened again in '95. Again, Flair and Sting are tagging in a match. Flair gets the hot tag from Sting. Rather than go after Brian Pillman and Arn Anderson, who are their opponents, he turns. This is actually great. Gets the tag. He gets in the ring, does a U-turn, and just starts attacking Sting.
Yeah, it's
actually a really funny swerve. Horsemen are back. You got Benoit, Flair, Arn, Brian Pillman throwing up the 4. It's a pretty fun swerve. It really is the rivalry that defined WCW.
That's what I was going to say, because this spanned from 1988 all the way to 1995.
Well, you take it all the way to 2001, the final Nitro, the last match.
Yeah, exactly.
So Sting versus Flair.
Sheesh, man. Like, over 10 plus years, these guys have been going at it. And yeah, they're like the main catalyst that really carried WCW in this feud. And like getting the 4 Horsemen involved is incredible.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I wonder how much that, at least in the early 90s, that was Dusty booking that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think he was the one that brought in RoboCop. Genius move. Absolutely genius move by Dusty.
So that's what we're going to do, baby. I'm going to go get the RoboCop. Big, huge movie, blockbuster, baby. The crowd, they're going to love it. They're all going to cheer for RoboCop. Dang, he's going to go out there and save you. Going to rip open that cage. You can go out there and kick Flair's ass up and down the place. That's what we're going to do. It's genius. I have it right here.
You know what? I can't remember where we heard this. But we were led to believe that was maybe actually the real, like actually Peter Weller.
Peter Weller in full gimmick.
That's what I heard. That could have been. We've never got confirmation.
I mean, it's hard to tell. With his distinguishable lower mouth half.
I know.
But I mean, obviously, RoboCop isn't what made this feud great. It's just a really funny.
Excuse me, Cal.
Really? Is that what really the RoboCop thing's big?
Let me think. This wasn't RoboCop 1, so you're right. If this was around the time of RoboCop 1, then I would say RoboCop kicks over the edge.
Yeah.
Because RoboCop 1 is a brilliant movie.
Oh, it's awesome. I love RoboCop 1. I just remember the sequels weren't that great.
Oh, no, the third one's horrible.
Yeah.
The second one is disturbing. The third one is absolutely horrible.
I mean, hell, you had Red getting killed by RoboCop.
Yeah, I know. I know. That was 87 was the first one. So this is the second one.
Yeah.
Really, you shouldn't be having a promotional tie-in between RoboCop 2 and any sort of vaguely family-friendly entertainment.
Yeah.
That second RoboCop movie is so messed up.
It's horrible. It's brutal.
It is brutal.
But you know what? RoboCop was selling a lot of toys at that time. So
Apparently there's a cartoon then.
Yeah. I don't know. I've seen. I don't know why we're talking about RoboCop.
Because RoboCop's awesome.
Is it that important? Okay.
Oh, RoboCop 1 is one of my 10 favorite movies maybe ever.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's up there.
What's the saying that RoboCop says to the bad guys? Get down, or punk, or something like that.
Well, there's Dead or Alive. You're coming with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your move, punk.
Yeah, that's the one. Your move, punk.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Gosh, it was so good. Man, that's a great movie. Anyways, instead of talking about RoboCop more, let's talk about number 2 here. Kazuchika Okada and Hiroshi Tanahashi. I know Tanahashi is generally credited with bringing New Japan out of the doldrums it was in the early mid-aughts when he started his ascendance to ace, I believe in the 2007-ish, I want to say. But what really brought New Japan back was the feud between Okada and Tanahashi, which kicked off after Wrestle Kingdom in 2012. So Tanahashi successfully defended the IWGP Heavyweight title against Minoru Suzuki in the main event. The following night in New Year's Dash, Okada returns from excursion in TNA Impact and challenges Tanahashi to a match at New Beginning.
That's after really horrible booking from TNA Impact.
I mean, Okada's essentially. I mean, he'd wrestled in New Japan prior to going to an excursion, but he's like kind of a rookie at this point.
Yeah. In
terms of the Rainmaker gimmick. You know? Well, actually, he'd been around for about a year, wrestling on and off. Because he did have a match at that Wrestle Kingdom against Yoshihashi. Yeah. His current stablemate. So sorry, the time frame's a little mixed up. So he'd been around for about a year, but it wasn't as if he was necessarily pushed to the moon yet. So he got a year of seasoning under his belt, and then he steps up to the ace Tanahashi in 2012 at New Year's Dash and says, "I'm challenging you." And at New Beginning in February, he beats him. He beats the ace.
Crazy.
He beats the ace.
Yeah.
And I know people have said a lot that Jay White got his opportunity way too quick.
I was gonna say, it sounds like Okada got his way, especially after coming back, only putting a year's work and then challenging. The champ, Tanahashi. That's insane.
I know it is pretty crazy, but the first year and a half post excursion careers of both Jay White and Okada, up until Jay White dropping the belt, kind of run parallel in ways.
They're similar.
So in terms of story beats, it's kind of interesting. And so these two guys would have been feuding for the better part of 7 years. I think they've had well over 30 matches against one another.
Oh, it's crazy.
They've main evented Wrestle Kingdom 3 times.
Yeah.
Since 2012. During Okada's last title run, not the current one, the one prior, he basically broke every record Tanahashi had set in relation to IWGP Championship reign, the title, except for one number of reigns. I think Tanahashi has 8 at this point. But you have arguably the two greatest champions in New Japan history involved in a constant back and forth with one another. And it's probably going to be that way until Tanahashi retires.
Yeah.
For a while earlier this year, they were tag teaming against each other or with each other to take on Bullet Club. After Jay White, Swerve Chaos, joined Bullet Club. And they just had a fantastic match at the opening night of the G1 in Dallas this past weekend.
First time New Japan's ever had a match, or the G1 or whatever.
It's been in the States, yeah.
In the States. And what's cool is that Okada said, this is the first time, but this won't be the last time.
That's great.
That's awesome.
That's great.
And that's cool that they were able to carry their feud from Japan over to the States.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's amazing.
And people were super into it.
Yeah.
Absolutely super into it. Number 1, Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock.
Yes.
The feud that defined the Attitude Era, the feud that really got me into wrestling, and the feud that probably made WWF more money than anything else.
The feud that, this is the feud that people always say, who's on your Mount Rushmore? They always say Austin, but who was able to go against Austin to create a larger-than-life character? The Rock.
Totally.
And The Rock is so... He's iconic right now.
Oh, yeah.
Still, like...
Top movie star in the world.
Top movie star in the world. So these two guys feuding, like they were the Attitude Era. Like they were awesome.
Yeah. They apparently first started feuding for the Intercontinental title, I think late 97. And Pritchard was talking about on this podcast where... Stone Cold had a match against Owen. Owen dropped him on his head. Stone Cold hurt his neck. When he was cleared to return, he got the belt back. And one of Austin's first feuds, I believe, heading into late 97, early 98, was supposed to be against Farouk, who at the time was the leader of the Nation of Domination.
Yep.
However, they noticed that The Rock was gaining a lot of steam, and so they changed course and decided to do the Austin Rock feud instead. I think this is the time when Austin threw the belt into the river and stuff. There was a lot of great back and forth between the two of them.
Their promos and their segments alone were so damn interesting and entertaining.
If I remember correctly, Austin just gave The Rock the belt. He didn't lose it. Of course, Austin would go on to win the Royal Rumble, the title from HBK at WrestleMania 14. But it seemed like all through 1998, they were running on parallel courses to be like 1A and 1B. You had Austin as champion feuding against Kane, Undertaker. I think he was hurt for part of the year.
Yeah.
Moving on to the end of the year up into the Rumble. Of course, his feud with McMahon, which so much of the McMahon feud was tied into the feud with The Rock.
Yeah, because they made The Rock one of his the corporate
champion. Yeah. It's Survivor Series 98, best pay-per-view ever. And so you have The Rock as the Intercontinental Champion. He had a really good feud with Triple H over the course of 98. Really helped to build him up.
Yep.
And so by the time Survivor Series rolls around, you have Stone Cold in the tournament, Deadly Games tournament. You have Foley. You have The Rock. The Rock had basically been forced to be a face at this point. Crowd loves him because he's so damn entertaining.
Yeah.
Of course, Austin's still top guy, and then you have Foley, who is being manipulated to kind of be the corporate champ or the corporate guy, seemingly.
Yeah.
And then when they have that massive swerve at the end of Survivor Series 98 where The Rock turns heel again and becomes the corporate champ, then Stone Cold has his foil for basically the next 5 years, his primary rival.
Yep.
So they face at Mania 15, main event, Stone Cold goes over. They would face in the main event of WrestleMania 17 and the second to last match, WrestleMania 19, which is Stone Cold's last match.
Yeah.
And they faced each other several times in various other configurations as well. Just when you get these two guys in the ring with mics in their hands, it's electric.
Yeah. And also, these two guys helped win the Monday Night War between them and WCW. So these guys having such a hot feud was able to create more buzz for the WWE at the time where it was losing so much steam. And it was becoming must-see TV because these two guys are going at it so hard.
Yeah, totally.
And now they're still super well known as the top entertainers around. Austin has his new show, and then The Rock is, like you said, the #1 movie star.
It's crazy.
And they're still relevant.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Yeah, insane.
Yeah, Stone Cold has that, what's that new show he has on?
Straight Up with Steve Austin.
Straight Up Steve Austin, that's right. There's some other ones that almost made the list. Probably tops among them was Undertaker and Kane.
Yeah.
Thought about putting that on.
Yeah.
Because that's a long-lasting rivalry.
And that falls in with the Attitude Era.
Totally.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like, there's not really a defining match. Everybody, like the defining moment you think of that is when Kane rips the cage off Hell in a Cell.
That was his debut too.
Yeah. But like they had their first match at WrestleMania 14 was all right.
Yeah.
But you don't really have that moment. It doesn't feel like. Following the death of Pero Agoyo, apparently I read a lot about his feud with El Santo.
Yeah.
And how I think it was one of El Santo's later feuds.
Yeah.
But apparently it was pretty huge.
Oh, I'm sure that, especially in Mexico at that time, it's probably insane.
So those just barely missed the cut, but I want to give a mention as well. So many great feuds throughout the history of pro wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons. I mean, this list doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just kind of our opinions.
Yeah, it's kind of our opinions.
Yeah.
Also, one that's kind of funny. Larry Zbyszko and Bruno Sammartino. I don't know if it's true, but Steve said to me that the whole way that Larry got into pro wrestling is he wandered into Bruno's backyard.
Yeah.
And started talking to him.
I could see that happening. I've met Larry Zbyszko many times. I know him. Yeah, well, Yeah, I could see that being the case. We just
wanders into somebody's backyard. And
wanders in his backyard.
Becomes
well, at the time, like, Larry Zbyszko was pretty jacked.
Yeah.
Like, he would talk to us about how much he could bench press, and he'd brag about it. But then you're looking at him now, you're like, dude, you're like this skinny old man. There's no but I'm sure back then, Bruno was willing to train him and make him his underling.
Yeah, and they were definitely mentor and protege until Zbyszko turned on him.
Yeah,
in the late 70s. So apparently that was a good feud for WWE or WWF at the time.
Yeah.
Anyways, that does it for us. Let us know what your favorite rivalries in the pro wrestling world are.
Yeah, please.
And in the comments. And until next time, we will see you later.
Goodbye.
Be a part of Going In Raw today at patreon.com/Steve and Larson. Starting at $1 a month, you can enjoy Going In Raw ad-free, gain access to the daily 30-minute Going In Raw post show, exclusive merchandise, and so much more. Support Going In Raw today. Click the link in the description.